Well, hello, cooey. Here's me, Kate, with Stories at 7, aka Jill and Ori for folks that like a story. And we're continuing Nutcracker and the Mouse King, the one with the 7 heads, with the story in a story, if you like. Because Godfather Drosselmier is telling little Poorly Mary, because don't forget she's laid up, telling little Poorly Mary and her slightly naughty brother Fred the story of the hard nut. And where Sue got us to was that they think they might have found the young man who has not shaved and has never worn boots. They think they might have found him. I wonder if he'd ever worn Wellingtons. Now there's a question. But I digress, which means I'm going off on one somewhere else, which you know I like to do. But let's get back to the story. So where Sue left us is that the doll maker Drosselmier, his son, quite liked to crack nuts for young ladies, and they called him the handsome little Nutcracker. "It is he!" cried the astronomer next morning, falling rapturously upon the clockmaker's neck. I think he's probably well pleased. "We have him! He is found! But 2 things, dearest colleague, must be seen to. In the first place, you must provide your excellent kinsman with a strong wooden head, having an underjaw that will stand a good strain. Then, on arriving at the capital, we ought to keep it carefully secret that we have brought along with us the young man to bite open the nut, Crackatuk. He should come onto the scene sometime later. I read in the horoscope that the king, after some others have broken their teeth over it to no purpose, will promise the hand of the princess and succession to the kingdom as a reward for whoever can crack this nut and restore Pirlipat's lost beauty. That's what they're playing at, is it? Drosselmeyer's cousin, the dollmaker, was well content that his youngster should marry the Princess Pirlipat and become a prince and a king. Ashakoko. He left the whole charge of the business to the messengers. That's Drosselmier, the engineer, and the astronomer fella. The head, which Drosselmier fitted onto his hopeful young nephew, turned out very well, so that he made most successful experiments at cracking the hardest of peach stones. As soon as Drosselmier and the astronomer announced at the palace their arrival with the nut, Crackatuk, the necessary advertisements were at once published, and these travellers, being now supplied with a beauty charm, many fine young men, some of them princes, eagerly came forward, trusting in their sound jaws to undertake Pirlipat's disenchantment. Because don't forget, it's got to be the fella that breaks open the nut, hands it to Pirlipat, closes his eyes and walks backwards 7 steps without stumbling and falling over. Then she will be restored to her previous loveliness. The messengers were not a little horrified when they saw the princess again. Her small body with its shrunken members, arms, legs, could scarcely support the huge unshapely head, while the hideousness of her countenance was enhanced by a white woolly beard that had grown over her mouth and chin. All happened just as the court astronomer had read in the horoscope. One youngster in shoes after another bit away at the Nutcrackertuk till he broke his teeth and jaws, without doing the princess the least bit of good. And as each was then borne away, half fainting, by the dentist kept ready at hand, he would moan out, "Oh, what a hard nut!" When now the king, in the anguish of his heart, promised daughter and kingdom to whomever would perform the disenchantment, there presented himself that pretty lad from Nuremberg, and modestly begged permission to take a trial. None of the candidates had pleased the princess so much as young Drosselmier. She laid her little hand on her heart and sighed deeply. "Ah, if it were he who would bite open the nut Crackatuk and become my husband." After most civilly saluting the king and queen, and also the Princess Pirlipat, young Drosselmier took the nut, Crackatuk, from the chief master of ceremonies, put it between his teeth, worked his head powerfully, and crack, crack! The shell broke into several bits. Dexterously, that means very carefully, picking from the kernel the rough fibres about it, that's the nut inside, he handed it to the princess with a respectful scrape of his foot, then closed his eyes and began to step backwards. The princess at once swallowed the nut, and oh, wonder! She was transformed into an angelic figure, the face dimpled rosy red and lily white, with the eyes shining blue and the long locks curled like threads of gold. She had been transformed into a lovely self. Music of trumpets and kettle drums swelled with loud exultation, that's like celebrating, of the people. The king and his whole court danced on one leg, as at Pirlipat's birth, and the queen had to be treated with eau de cologne, having fainted away in her transports of joy. Young Drosselmier, who had still the 7 steps backwards to accomplish, that means he's still got to do it, was not a little flustered by this great tumult and noise, yet he kept his balance and stood, raising his right foot for the last step, when Lady Mousykins, squeaking and squealing shrilly, ran out of the floor, so that in the act of setting down his foot he trampled upon her, which made him stumble, and he had almost fallen. Oh, mishap! Suddenly was the youth become as deformed an object as Princess Pirlipat before, so he's taken on her, the curse, if you like. His body went all tiny, and he could scarcely bear the weight of his big unshapely head, with great eyes staring out of it, and a broad, horribly gaping mouth. Instead of his... nearly dropped my Kindle in the excitement. Instead of his fine bunch of hair, there hung behind him a kind of narrow wooden cloak, with which his lower jaw was worked. Clockmaker and astronomer stood beside themselves for dread and amazement, yet they saw how Lady Mousykins rolled on the floor. Her ill nature had not gone unpunished, for, with the sharp heel of his shoe, young Drosselmier had trodden so hard on her that she must die. And, writhing, she squeaked and squawked pitifully. "Oh, Crackatuk, hard nut that proves my end! Ah, Nutcracker, thy hour is now at hand! Hee-hee! Woe's me! But also woe to thee, my son the Mouse King with the 7 crowns! Will soon avenge his murdered mother's wrongs on thee, thou ugly, spoiled, conceited doll! Oh, life so fair and bright, from which I fall to shades of gloomy death! I fail for breath, my last I squeak. Oh, ah, ee, squeak!" And then she was gone. With this cry expired Lady Mousykins, and was carried out by the royal firemender. Hitherto no one had thought of young Drosselmier, but now Pirlipat reminded the king of his promise, and at once he ordered the hero of the day to be brought forward. But when the unfortunate fellow showed himself, with his big head and his tiny body, the princess held both hands before her eyes, crying, "Away! Away with the hideous Nutcracker!" Well, that's not very nice, is it? Forthwith the High Marshal seized him by his narrow shoulders and threw him out of the door. The king, full of rage that a Nutcracker should be forced upon him as a son-in-law, put all the blame on the clockmaker and the astronomer, and banished them forever from his capital. Well, that's not very nice either. That had not appeared in the horoscope which the astronomer cast at Nuremberg, but he did not fail to make fresh observations, and, now read in the stars, that young Drosselmier might take heart in his new condition, for, in spite of it, he should yet become a prince and a king. His unshapeliness, however, would disappear only when the 7-headed heir of Lady Mouserkins, whom she had borne after the death of her 7 elder sons, should be slain by his hand, and when a lady had fallen in love with him, just as he was. It's kind of a bit like Beauty and the Beast, isn't it? You must have actually seen young Drosselmier about Christmas time in his father's shop at Nuremberg, a nutcracker, it is true, but also a prince in disguise. There, children, is the story of the hard nut. And now you know why people so often say, "That was a hard nut to crack." And now that's how it comes that nutcrackers are so ugly. So ended the counsellor's tale. Mary thought that Princess Pirlipat was an ill-natured, ungrateful thing, like I did. But Fred assured her that if the Nutcracker were a brave fellow, he would easily do for the Mouse King and soon regain his former lovely appearance. Well, there we go. And that is where we will leave Mary and Fred and Councillor Drosselmier and the 7-headed Mouse King and the Nutcracker for now. Sue's going to be back tomorrow as we continue Nutcracker and the Mouse King. Now then, you lot take care and try and see something funny. Not me. Try and see something funny today and tell somebody about it and share it. Share the smile. All right, my loves, you take care and I'll be saying cooey to you soon.